All right, so I left off on the bottom of page 190, just so you know. All right, so we just looked at this on 189, and what the author said was, we want to keep the toolbar, etc. Click pin. I did that, but I forgot to jump back over before I did this, because the author says here, start by unchecking the margins, the constrain the margins checkbox, and then do the other stuff. So let's take a look. Never had this happen before. Doesn't matter whether it's checked or unchecked. I just want to go in there and put a 0 there, and a 0 there, and a 0 there. But for some reason, it's not letting me do that. I'm trying to figure out for the life of me why it wouldn't let me do that. Maybe it's because I went to switching views and not on the toolbar. So that's probably what it was. That's it. So that should be a 0. That should be a 0. And that should be a 0. All right. Now, it already was a 0, so where it says there add 3 constraints in the book, I'll only add 2 of them. Okay? All right. And you can see that it's starting to pin the stuff down. Then they tell you to come up here, and it says finally change the update frame. Oops, there's one more thing I should have done there, so that was on me. The other thing we were supposed to do, where it says here update frames and it's got none, they want you to change that to items of new constraints right there, and I didn't do that. So that was the other thing. So what I'm going to do, since I think I screwed it up, is I'm going to highlight my constraints there. Come on. As soon as it lets me. Come on. And I'm going to remove them both because I didn't do it right. So I'm going to click on the toolbar, which is what I should have done to begin with. Click on pin. That should be a 0. That should be a 0. That should be a 0. They already are. And where it says update frames over here, I want to change that to items of new constraints. All right. It says so that the toolbar's representation in the storyboard moves to the new constraint location. Then click add 3 constraints. All right. It says now to make sure you're on the right track, we should click run right now. Well, before I do that, I'm going to go up to editor, and I'm going to go to resolve layout issues, and I'm going to say update frames. And I thought that was going to get rid of that, but it didn't. Let's run it and see what it looks like. And the author mentions, if you screw up like I just did, he said just remove the constraints and try it again. But again, in my zeal to get this done, I oftentimes try to do things before I go and read ahead a little bit. That's on me. Simulator in use. Well, that means I've already got it running, so I better turn it off.
Too loud. Too quiet. We're too quiet.
I won't even touch that one. Now I did, for lack of better words, kind of cheated a little bit. What I mean is, all the code that you put in here, rather than having to key it in, I went into the Xcode files from the book and I copied it to the flash drive. So I don't have, because there's not going to be enough time to get through this project today if I'm going to be typing in code. All right, from here on out, there'll be a bit of code that we have to do. Well, they're switching views. Okay? So, they're saying that's the way that it should look. As far as I can tell, it'll be okay. So, I'm up to page 191 in here. And notice what it says. This is what I talked about before. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go the other way. In other words, now we're going to link the toolbar button to the view controller. In the past, what we've always done is we create that control, we control drag, we choose everything, but we're going to do it a little bit differently now. All right, so if you are following along in the book, I'm on page 191. All right. All right, so he says the toolbar has a single button. Let's go back down to here. Boy, oh boy. The toolbar has a single button. We'll use that button to let the user switch between the different views. All right? It says double click on the storyboard and change it to, which we've already done. And I'm looking at it, I'm wondering where the heck that went. Oh, yeah. There's my view. It's not showing me my toolbar. And it's not showing me, so I'm going to just remove that toolbar and do it all over again. That's fine. All right, so I'm coming over here. There's my toolbar. I'm going to drag it right back in again. Okay. All right. Is there anybody watching this right now who, well, that wasn't the whole question. Because what I'm trying to show you, and I'm failing at, but what I'm trying to show you here is there's the toolbar. So according to that, it's here, but it's not showing down here. All right, and it's.
Oh, was it that small? Sometimes when you do the update constraints, it turns real small, and I just saw a real small square up in your upper left hand corner.
All right, then that might be what it is. Okay, so up there, you mean?
Right.
But what I'm wondering is, okay, and I guess that actually makes some sense. But when I came down here, it was supposed to be 0, 0. That was supposed to be a 0. All right. And this,
Setting the width and height, maybe.
oh, up here, you mean? Yeah. Yeah, and they showed 644 here, so maybe that's it. All right.
Oh, I think you put a check in the width and height.
You are correct.
Right where it says width and height, check those.
Oh, here too, you mean?
On the
Yeah.
left. Put a check on the left, and then change that.
There you go. when I did this at home, they were saying you may not have to do any of this because it all might be set. So of course, when I did it at home, everything was set. Okay? All right.
I'm not sure, I'm just taking a guess here.
Hey, and I'm never too proud to ask for help. So there it is. Now, for some reason, it's at the top.
Because you didn't put a number at the,
What was that?
go back to the, and that number at the top, you didn't put anything.
It's supposed to be 0. In fact, this is supposed to be 0.
500 or something.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
536, 0, 0, 0.
Put your checks back.
This one down here is supposed to be 0. And that one we weren't supposed to have to set. That one supposedly was already set to 536. Let's just go on. How's that? All right. So it says now we can link the toolbar to our action in our action method in switching view controller. So in other words, what we're going to want to do in just a minute, if I have any more success with that than I've had with everything else, is we're going to want to go and hook that on to this action that's right here. All right, this switch views action. All right, it says selecting the toolbar in the interface builder can be tricky. And they say that you should go through it by going through the document outline. So I want to go into the storyboard here. And with the storyboard up, I'm going to close everything that I don't need. And I'm going to bring up the assistant editor. Okay? So the author says if you want to choose the toolbar, all right, it says choosing the button, toolbar button can be tricky. So they say click it in here. So now I've got it. All right, it says once you have that selected, control drag it over to the yellow switching view controller on the top of the scene. Now that hopefully makes sense to people because what they're saying is do this and let go. Okay? All right. It says release the mouse button and select the switch views, which is right there. So that's how we did it. Kind of the opposite of the way that we've been doing it in the past. All right? And they tell you that for whatever reason, if it doesn't work, to just basically they say try it again. Okay? All right, 192. We have one more thing to point out in this scene, which is that the switching view controller's view outlet. This outlet is already connected to the view in the scene. The view outlet is inherited from the parent. We've already talked about that. Okay? So now we're told to come back in here and come back into our regular view controller right here. And for the first time, we're going to put some, maybe about the first time, we're going to put some code in here. All right? So the code that we're going to put in here, I want to show it to you, and then we'll actually put it in. Oops. Because it looks pretty darn ugly. So again, this is in our view did load. Okay? Blue view controller equals storyboard instantiate view controller blue as blue view controller. All right, set the frame and switch to it. In English, what this means is when the program first starts running, take the blue view controller, and that's going to be the one that comes up when the program starts to run. And the other thing to realize with this is we're going to identify it as blue. That'll become more important later when we look at some more of the code. All right? So like I said, in the past, I've gone through here and I've done this. I've just copied it and then pasted it in, but there's appear to be some problems when I've done that. So what I've done tried to do for today was I came up and said, hey, well, maybe I can make it a little easier on myself. So I brought those. Here's the blue view controller, and let's see. So I've got that, and I need there's that one right there. And so I have that. I have the Swift view controller, switching view controller, I should say, and the yellow view controller. So now I've got all my code here. So as I come in here and want to go and put it in, I'll be able to just do some drag and drop. Okay, that didn't make sense. Hopefully it will in just a minute. So the author says, let's go in here and let's grab this code that's right there that I just showed you from the book. All right, copy it to the clipboard, come back in here, and paste it in. Okay? Now, you'll notice that right now I'm getting an error message for this switch view controller from 2. We haven't written that yet. Once we write that, that should go away. Okay? I got the same problem when I did this at home. If you want to know more about the view did load, the author mentions it on page 192. That's not really that big of a thing one way or the other. That's what happens when the view gets loaded into memory. But the author mentions here, again, I'm not going to read this to you. This is in the handout that I gave you. If you didn't like my explanation, what he's doing is he's basically saying when you start to run the program, make sure that the blue view controller is the one that comes up on the screen. In English, that's what this is saying. All right? So he breaks it down line by line here on page 193. So if you want a better explanation than the one I just gave you, that'd be the one I'd use. All right? So the author says, now let's go and bring in, it says, let's load. Okay, let's go back. This is what I mentioned to you before. The author said that's fine. So what we've said is when the program starts up, load the blue view in the memory. But he says, why didn't we also load the yellow view there also? And in English, what he says there is, it's possible when you've got the program up, pretend that's blue, and you've got the thing down here that says switch views. All right? So this is going to come up, it's going to be blue, and there'll be a button here that says press me or whatever the heck it is. All right? The author says it is possible, doesn't know why you'd want to do this, but it is possible that you could just press the button and you might never want to actually switch to the yellow view for whatever reason. So you might run the program several times and never click the switch views button. So that's why he's saying that they're using this lazy loading in here. And that's what he's talking about. He says we'll load the yellow view the first time we actually need it. Again, it's called lazy loading, and the idea behind it is it's a way of keeping your memory overhead down. You don't bring something into memory until it's actually needed. What you'll also see in just a couple minutes is when you bring one into memory, if the other one was already in memory, so if you already had blue in memory and you bring in yellow, you can swap blue out of memory now. And that's the whole idea behind this lazy loading. So he says, we'll load the yellow view the very first time we need it. Again, it's called lazy loading. And he says, fill in the stub earlier for the switch views that we started to key in earlier. So again, I've got this over here. Come on, blue. Where are you? So this is that switch views that we started writing before, but we only put in the stub for it. All right, so I'm grabbing all of this code that he's put in here. In fact, I may not even have it. Let's just grab everything. I just grabbed everything. We created that before, but I'm just going to paste this in. I'm going to have too much in here now, but that's fine. I no longer need that line. And you'll notice I'm still getting those errors in the switch view controller from and to, because again, we haven't written that yet. Now, he goes through a really long diatribe here, starting on 193, where he explains all the code that's happening in here. But what I did was I copied every bit of code in. So what he does in a bunch of steps, I did in one step. And I'm going to explain this to you the way that I understand it, and hopefully I'm going to make it easier for you to understand and not more confusing. Again, when do we want to call this? We want to call this when we want to switch views, right? Okay? So the author's saying here, create the new view controller if required. So what he's saying here is, if there isn't already a yellow view controller, all right? So if it doesn't exist, we're going to create it, which is what we do right here. And it looks weird, and his explanation is much better than anyone I could give you. But he talks about it in here, and he says, basically, it almost looks like you're making the same control twice, or the same check twice. But notice what it says. This one says if the controller is nil. This one says if the super view is nil. All right? If the super view is nil, it's the first time basically you're running the thing, period. Because what's the super view? The super view is switching view controller. All right? So what they're saying here is, if you're just starting out and you're going right away to the yellow one and it doesn't exist, create it. Otherwise, if the blue one doesn't exist, create it. Now that's not a great explanation, but that's pretty much what you'll get when you read through the stuff that's in here. And then he says, as we go through this, what we want to do is we want to animate this. When you run this, if you follow his instructions entirely in here, when you run this, you put this code in here later. Just so you know, all this code that's right here, for just a second, pretend it's not there. But what happens is, when you switch from one view controller to the other, it's in a very abrupt switch. What this code right here does is it does a flip. You may have noticed when I first started running it, it literally looked like it flipped. That's the code that does that right here. It is not mandatory that you do that, but that's considered, as you go from one view to another, that's considered a more standard way of doing it. So he's showing you some animation techniques in order to be able to do it. It happens over 0.4 of a second. All right. There are different ones in here that you can use, and the one that he talks about is view flip. There's a few other ones that you can use. And basically, in English, what this says is, if you're at the blue one and you click it, flip to the yellow one. Otherwise, if you're at the yellow one, flip over to the blue one. All right. In English, that's really what he's saying right there. So again, if you want a better explanation than the one I just gave you, you'd want to look at, so there's the beginning of the code there on page 193, all right, and 194. So he explains it right here. Again, I don't want to sit and read to you, and I don't want to confuse you any more than I possibly already have done. Now, this gets into the other part of lazy loading here on page 195. Again, you can read this code yourselves. What he's saying is, if the blue view controller is the one that's currently showing on the screen, what you literally can do then is you can set the other one equal to nil. In other words, you're releasing that memory. Now, I think you'd all agree, this is, for what it's worth, this is a pretty simple application. I think everybody'd agree with that. But if you are working with a really complex app where you have all sorts of screens and they're very intricate and they're really bloaty, in other words, they got a lot of stuff in them, having all of them being in memory at one time could slow your machine down to the point where it would almost not be moving. So even though he's only got 2 view controllers in here, he says, hey, if one's in memory, get the other one out of memory. And that's what he's doing right there. So he puts that, notice where he put it, in the did receive memory warning. because you'll receive that memory warning at the time, literally when memory is at a premium, which it always is, but when you're about maybe to run out of memory. All right, so I'm going to grab that code. And then paste it in. All right. He mentions on the top of 196 here, lazy loading is a key component of resource management in iOS. So the only thing that's left to do is to do this switch controller to and from thing. And that's the code that you see right here. All right. It says we need to take care of some housekeeping as well. Again, what he does is he goes through this, but he explains it by doing the second one first and then the first one. All right, so let's take a look at his explanation here. So I'm looking at this second if statement that you see. So it says this first block is going to remove the outgoing view controller, but he says let's look at the second one first. It's a little more interesting, in his opinion. All right. So the first line says self.addChild view controller, all right, to VC, which is view controller. All right. As it says, the first block of code, here's the first line of code. This code makes the incoming view controller a child of the switching view controller, which should make sense. The switching view controller is the parent of both of these. All right, so that's what we're telling you right there. All right? As it says, view controllers like switching view are sometimes referred to as controller view controllers or container view controllers. Okay. He goes through what the from and the to is in here, but again, you're going back and forth between the two. All right, so that's that first line. Then the next line says self.view.insert subview, etc. All right, so it says next, what they're doing is they're loading that controller, but they're loading it in the background. All right, and putting it in there at index 0 literally says to do that. It says to load it into the background. He explains this here on the top of 197. So it says here it's inserting it. It tells it to put it behind everything else. It says doing that it'll always be visible on the screen. All right, since we're inserting the content views behind it. Finally, we have to let the parent know what we just did, and that's this line right here. So that's adding the stuff, and then that first if statement was removing all the stuff that was in there. All right. Oops. All right, so 197, it says, at this point, the code is complete, but we can't run the app yet because we don't have the blue and the yellow content controllers in the storyboard. It says both these controllers are extremely simple. In fact, they're almost identical to one another. Since their functionality is so similar between the blue and the yellow controller, the author says it would have been possible that instead of having the two different classes like we have, all right, the blue view controller and the yellow view controller, we could have had just one class. All right, but he says it really doesn't make a lot of sense to do that because normally each view will be in its own class. All right, so it says here, the two action methods we're going to implement do nothing more than show an alert. So it says go ahead and add this. So this code goes, this is all the code here that goes into blueviewcontroller.swift. This should make sense to you. This basically is what happens when you click that button. That's all the code that's here. All right, so it came up. The title of the button was blue view button pressed. The message was you pressed the button. The style was it was an alert. All right, and the action that came up down below, if you remember, it said, yep, I did. All right, so when you click the button, that's what happened. And the one for the yellow is almost identical to that one. So when I come in here and grab the code for the blue view controller, all the code then is right here under the blue button pressed. So there's that. Then we come in and do a similar thing into the yellow view controller, which we're going to do in just a minute. Okay. So what I just did was I implemented the code that the author put in here on 197 and then on 198. All right, that gets us down to the middle of page 198 here. And as the author says right here, it says we save the file, and there's a few other things that we have to do. They're more housekeeping in nature, but there's just a couple things that we have to do, so if you bear with me, there's only about 4 or 5 pages left in the chapter. All right. So it says, next, come back into our code here and select the main storyboard. All right. It says we want to open it in Interface Builder so we can make a few changes. First, we need to add a new scene for the Blue View controller. Up until now, each storyboard we dealt with had just a single controller. You know that. We've done that before. All right? Okay. Remember, there's the Blue View controller. All right, that's the code that we just put in, and that's the Yellow View controller. All right? So, they tell us to go back into main storyboard, and then the author says we can close this now. We don't need that assistant editor open anymore. We don't need this open anymore. All right, I'm just giving us some room here, but we will need this open. All right. So the author says what we need to do then is we need to go and create a new view controller. This is a little bit different. It looks a little bit different because it is a little bit different. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to type in view controller. All right, we want to put a new one in here. Now, what you don't want to do is you don't want to grab it and stick it right in the middle here. You want to stick it outside of it. Okay, so I'm going to put it so where part of it is in here and part of it is up above. So I'm coming over here, and I'm going to do, and I had problems with this a couple times when I tried to work with it. It took 2 or 3 times before it actually seemed to like what I was doing. So move this down. There we go. There it is. Now that's the new one that I just added. All right, and it says in the row of icons at the top, right there, it says click the yellow view controller icon, and then bring up the identity inspector, which is, I believe, up right now. All right. Then it says in the custom class section, it should default here to UI view controller. We want to change this so it says blue view controller, and there it is. Okay. All right. Just below the custom class, it says you should see an identity inspector right here. And one of the things that they put in there, that is in there, is a storyboard ID. Do you remember earlier when I showed you that and we put in there, when we instantiated it, we put the word blue inside of double quotes? That's the word that you need to put in here. All right, then when we get done, we're going to do the same thing for the yellow one. So I want to put the word blue in here. All right. And that pretty much is it. So now I can hit enter, boom, that one's in there. Okay? Now I want to come back in and I want to grab another view controller. And I again want to put it, I just put it way up on top here. Same kind of thing. So I'm going to come up back over here. That's going to be, doesn't show me yellow view controller, which I don't like, but hopefully there it is. Yellow view controller. and the ID will be yellow. All right? So hopefully I've done just about everything that they told us to do. Okay? But there's a little bit more to do, so I'm up to page 199. First thing is, we have changed this. All right, we have changed this. Notice it says yellow view controller. The problem is right now it's not yellow, so I'm clicking on it. I'm going to go over here to my attributes inspector, and I'm going to change the background color, and I'll just pick kind of a muted yellow. All right, so that's that one. Then I also want to come over to my blue view controller, which is over here. Okay, drag that down, come on. There you can see it. I want to click on that, and I want to change the background color. And we'll make that, I don't know, a dark blue, how about a medium blue? Okay, so we've got both those done. That's what they're telling us to do here on the background on page 199 near the bottom of the page. All right, then we are to, after we do this, we're to add a button to each one of these. Okay, you know, not by now, you know how to add buttons. So add it. They tell us to try to center it pretty much. Okay. And this one is supposed to say, I think it's just press me, but I don't remember. Change it right here. Okay. Now, what's the problem? Well, look at the text color. That doesn't work very well with a background color, so I'm going to change the text color on the button. They say make it white or make it black. I made it black. All right, I'm also going to stretch this out just a tad if I can. Okay, boom. All right, then they say we're supposed to select the button and do an editor align, and they want us to do a vertical center in container and a horizontal center in container. There's the horizontal. And there's the vertical. Okay? So it should be centered in the container. All right. All right. Now they say, now what we do, I'm on the bottom of page 199. It says, with the button still selected, switch to the connections inspector. I always forget which one that is. Right there. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to drag from the touch-up event that's in here. So with the button highlighted, we want to drag from the touch-up event. Remember, that's basically the button that's, or the event that's associated with button clicking. All right. So it says drag from the touch-up event to the yellow view controller at the top of the scene. So do that. All right. And we're going to do a similar action in the yellow one in just a second. That's what they say on page 200. It's time to pretty much do the same thing. So they tell you to bring this one up, come back in here. Again, add a button, center it pretty much, change the text to press me. I think they might have said press me too, but it truly doesn't matter. All right. Editor, align, horizontal, editor, align. Yep, I lost it. You're right. Editor, align, vertical. All right. Then they tell you again to come to the connection, make sure the button's selected. Again, go from the touch up inside, control drag, and showing you my non-coordinated ability. Come on, that's not what I want. right, so that did that. That's everything on the top half, as far as I know, of page 200. Finally, they talk about the animation starting on the bottom of page 200. And they explain in detail on 200 and 201 everything that's in there as far as the flip and all the other stuff. All right. They also explain on page 202, on the bottom of the page and going on to 203, the different options that you have available in here. What I'm going to do is a file, save. I'm going to, and again, if I missed a step, we're going to know real fast. How's that? Build failed. Never a good sign, is it? Well, usually the best way to try to find this stuff is to go to View, Navigators, Project Navigator, and start to look in your files to see, look at your code and see if there's any errors in the code. So, Yellow View Controller. I don't see any errors in there. Blue View Controller. I don't see any errors in there. Switching View Controller. All right. Use of unresolved identifier. Switch View Controller. Did I not put that function in? Hey, anything's possible. So it says unresolved identifier, switch view controller. I'm missing something. All right. Hopefully that's the only thing that's keeping me from running this. Since we are close to out of time, I'll try to find that by the next class and show you what it was. All right. So I'm going to save what I have. Hopefully that I'm very close and there's just one or two mistakes. Now, hopefully one of the things that you're getting out of this is the fact that if you take the time and try to do this yourselves, okay, I think you're going to get a lot more out of it than watching me ball my way through this. All right. When I do it at home, that's why, like I said, there's two parts of this that I've already done, and everything worked pretty slick. For some reason, when I click the button, I mean the animation works great and everything, but when I click the buttons, I'm not getting the message. Okay. And what does that mean? That means I just did something too fast. But the point is, I think this one will work fine once we get it to work on Thursday. And again, on Thursday, I'll show you the calculator. All right? We'll pick it up then.
You didn't get your tablet connected.
I got everything set up and I just figured it out.
One question, when you're in your virtual desktop, do you have the USB set up to connect automatically?
I'm not sure, but like I checked the drop down and checked the setup.
Alright.
I'm not sure if everything's on.
Okay, because I don't know what's going on.
I'll just check it.
Well,
Well, I'm just kind of curious. I don't know if it works.
so they have my home.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
done the same
Yeah,
thing
it's
at home.
Yeah, and you're going, you kind of walk like a coin.
They do have the new wireless setup for us too.
Oh, good.
I did not have Ziegler log on. Okay, so you didn't have that check.
I did earlier, yeah. I just have back to the desktop,
Oh.
so I didn't have automatic. And that all it does, those things just kind of checks it for you.
Well, yeah, just log on there, we connect automatically. The ones that connected automatic
Hello? Yeah.
It's like, I've run configuration. Is that what's happening with people?
Yeah, it's just, well, actually, when it does install correct in Device Manager,
Yeah.
you should see Android,
Okay.
what is it? Composite.
All right, sounds good. Sandy's supposed to be picking me up in about 10 minutes, so
Yeah,
as soon as she does, we're gonna head over there, so that is,
Yeah, it should.
okay, thank you, bye-bye.
Wait, so you said it shows up in the virtual device manager?
No, in, on, Device Man, on Windows Device Manager.
Oh.
This one.
Yeah.
Yeah, there would be like an Android device up here, and it says Android composite device or something like that. I don't remember the exact word. So I'm gonna look around tonight and see what more I can find out. Well, hopefully I'll have.
Not the only one that broke.
No, no.
I didn't even plug it in before.
Sure. Well, you didn't either, I called him. But that's, I noticed he was sitting there pointing at me. What do you need?
We had a thing like this. First one, I take my GED testing. They used to fill us all out and see where we need to work.
Oh, yeah.
There's all kinds
So
of
they
questions.
were
One
going
is,
to change it to correct, and then
draw a house.
this part that was still wrong.
Square.
They were just change all the
You
check
read
that
through
were
the very first thing, you read all the instructions.
Right.
Yes, it must be.
To read through the whole